All right. Welcome, 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 everybody. Welcome to the Integrative Wellness and Development Podcast. I am Mike DeLuca. I am your host. We have a wonderful, wonderful show for you tonight. An amazing guest, someone who has really impressed me and is going to open your heart, open your consciousness, open your mind. And we have a lot to talk about. But before we do that, it's important that I have to do the housekeeping. So, as you know, it's important that this show is not affiliated officially with any group, any other organization. There are no sponsors. This is simply here to help share information for information, inspiration, perspiration, and all kinds of other Asians. But mainly, it's a result of my insatiable desire to learn, to know, to grow, and to share everything that I learn with you all as my gift. So that's what it's about. We are in no way, shape, or form here to try to convince you to change your point of view, change your beliefs. Of course, we can also make no claims that anything that we will share is going to diagnose, treat, or prevent any kinds of illnesses, problems, challenges, injuries. But I can guarantee you that the information and our guests today is definitely going to inspire you. And I'm really, really excited to have our guest with us. And let me I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here to tell you a little bit about what's going on here. As you've been seeing in my posts, tonight we have a truly amazing guest, Dr. Yvonne Kason. And here is her website, dyvonneKason.com. This is her new book, which you're getting a little sneak peek because in a couple of weeks, she is going to be launching it officially. Her book, The Roadmap to the Great Awakening. You want to make sure you get this book, and we'll talk more about it. And you can find out more about that wherever you buy your books, but also on her website as well has information. So let's talk a little bit about Yvonne. Okay. So Dr. Yvonne Kason, MD, MED, CCFP, FCFP. That's a lot of letters. She is the president and a founder of Spiritual Awakenings International, and you'll be hearing a lot about that tonight, as well as a past president of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Spiritual Awakenings International is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about all types of spiritually transformative experiences, known as STEs, not to be confused with the other ST thing that you know. Dr. Kason first coined the phrase spiritually transformative experiences in 1994. Dr. Kason has had 5 near-death experiences, or NDEs, 2 in her childhood and 3 in her adult life, as well as multiple spiritually transformative experiences of many kinds. Dr. Yvonne is a retired family physician and MD psychotherapist, previously on the faculty at the University of Toronto, and an internationally renowned expert on near-death experiences, Kundalini awakening, and other spiritually transformative experiences. In 1990, Dr. Kason was the first Canadian medical doctor to specialize her medical practice in researching and counseling patients who had diverse types of STEs and NDEs. She has over 40 years experience counseling NDE and STE experiencers. Dr. Kason has 7 published books. Besides her new book, Roadmap to the Great Awakening, her other most recent book, Soul Lessons from the Light, How Spiritually Transformative Experiences Changed My Life, Also, Touched by the Light, Exploring Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And now her new book, Roadmap to the Great Awakening, Purifying the Heart. She has made hundreds of professional presentations, has given scores of media interviews, close to 100 podcast interviews, and is in demand as a keynote speaker. Dr. Yvonne is a devoted mother and grandmother who enjoys traveling and gardening and lives in Toronto, Canada. And again, you'll be able to find out more information about her at YvonneKason.com. All right, that's our introduction. Now let's meet the real person, the live person on our screen. Yvonne, thank you so much for joining us tonight, but also thank you for all the amazing things you have done to help people who've had NDE and spiritually transformative experiences and may not have had the grounding and capability to deal with them in a balanced way. Thank you. Thank you for spreading the word, sharing all this information. And again, we're very grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Great. So let's start out. You survived five near-death experiences. Okay. What
Yes.
what what were the most profound ones that affected you the most? And if you're willing to share what happened, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, every single near-death experience affected me in a definite positive way.
Ah,
And also brought its own challenges afterwards, because as one's consciousness starts opening to spiritual experiences and the world around you, people are not having those experiences, that leads to challenges. So, but your question was which of my experiences were most impactful, I think is what you're asking in my life. And I would say that my three adult near-death experiences were definitely very impactful, each of them in their own way. And I talk about that actually in my new book that you mentioned, Roadmap to the Great Awakening, how each of them seemed to propel me onto a new spiritual life stage in my life. So it wasn't like the same thing over and over again. It was like they were each launching me on the next step in my life journey. So the one that really began my adult spiritual awakening journey happened when I was 26, when I was in I was already a young doctor. And I had graduated medical school, and I was assigned as a resident in a northern area in Canada in the winter. And I was in a medevac plane crash. And in the plane crash, we flew into bad weather. The plane went down. The pilot tried to guide the small twin engine plane. It was not a helicopter, a small twin engine plane, to try and let belly land on the surface of a semi-frozen lake so it wouldn't crash into trees. And he sort of managed to do that, but the ice was too thin. And as soon as the plane stopped skidding across the ice, it broke through the ice, nosedive, and sunk into very deep water. So I had to get out of the plane and eventually swim through ice cold, freezing water with the strong current to the closest shore, which was very far away. But interesting is that my near-death experience, which happened in this plane crash, and I'm about to describe it for you, it actually started before the plane crashed. It actually started when the plane was going down, because I was tending to my patient who was critically ill. And if you've ever traveled in a twin propeller plane, you know the sounds of the motors are very loud. And it was a very small plane, so I'm like 10 feet from one motor and maybe 20 feet from the other motor, so I could hear the motors really loud. All of a sudden, I could hear that one of the engines stopped, and there was sputtering, and the propeller was sputtering to a stop. And then a few minutes later, the other propeller stopped going and sputtered to a stop. So we had no engines. We're up in the air in an airplane. And the plane started going down with like really, really bad turbulence. We were in a storm. So if you ever wondered what a plane crash is like, it's like the worst turbulence you've ever been in. So the plane was rocking like crazy. And instantly, it was like a reflex. It just came out of my heart. The thought, oh God, help, we're going to die. And it seems as if, in retrospect, that was close enough to a prayer that that is actually when my near-death experience began. Because as soon as that came out of that thought came out of my heart, all of a sudden, and I was feeling intense fear and panic, all of a sudden, this force field of peace started descending upon me. And it literally was pushing down all of my fear and panic. Plane hadn't crashed yet. We were still going down. And I was overcome with this feeling of peace and this feeling of safety. And in this peacefulness, I heard a very strong, clear inner voice. And it was a masculine voice, like a man's voice. And I had never heard inner voices before this particular experience. And the voice said, "Be still and know that I am God. I am with you now and always." And I cannot express in words the spiritual vibration that went through my soul as I heard those words. I mean, I felt the presence of the divine. And so I was fully awake, fully conscious. Plane hadn't crashed yet, but I was feeling totally at peace, totally unafraid to die, and feeling the presence of the divine. Anyway, I comforted the patient a little bit as the plane was going down. The pilot did his heroic attempt at a belly landing. The plane started sinking. I had to quickly get out of the sinking plane. I tried to pull the patient out. The nurse and I tried, but we couldn't get her out. She unfortunately went down with the plane and into the deep water and perished. Then I found myself, looking around. Fortunately, I was a very strong swimmer, but this is the middle of winter in Canada, in the middle of a blizzard, strong blowing snow. The water was all choppy. I'm wearing heavy parka, heavy boots. They're pulling me down like lead weights into the water. And I hear the voice again, and it says, "Swim to shore." Now, um, I have to forgive myself because I was inexperienced in higher guidance at this point in my life. So I didn't follow the inner guidance. I, in fact, mentally argued with it. I remember mentally, sir, I took lifeguarding in high school. They told you never try to swim to shore in a boating accident. That it's too far. You'll drown if you try. So no, I'm not going to try swimming to shore. So I ignored what I now realize was higher guidance. And I did instead what the pilot was shouting, "Try to get on the ice, try to get on the ice." So I turned and I swam away from the shore and I was swimming towards, the broken up ice. But the voice is repeating, "Swim to shore." When I got to the ice, it was way too thin. It would not support anybody's weight. The voice repeats, "Swim to shore." So finally, I surrendered to what I now know was higher guidance, and I started swimming to shore. And it was a really long and a really difficult swim. And people like the pilot, who later on swam to shore, said, "I'm amazed you made it because I barely made it." And he was much bigger and more muscular than me. But it was a very difficult swim. I went under a few times and then with all my strength, just try to claw my way back up to the surface and get some air in my lungs. And then all of a sudden, partway to shore is when my near-death experience deepened. That's the vocabulary we use today when it changes. It deepened. And all of a sudden, I heard this loud inner rushing sound like the roar of a waterfalls. And the same time as I heard that roaring noise, I felt my consciousness rise up above my body. And suddenly there I was, maybe 20 or 30 feet above my body, looking down. Now my body was still alive. It was still swimming to shore. I wasn't dead. But it wasn't just that I was above my body. It was actually more complicated than that. It was actually that my consciousness was two places at the same time. And with the split screen TV now, we can understand it. It was like the small part of my consciousness, the small image in the split screen was still in my body that was swimming to shore. But the big picture, most of my consciousness was above my body looking down. So my consciousness was two places at the same time, but the bulk of it was above. And then what happened is the bulk of my consciousness rose higher, and I rose into this, it's hard to put words to it, if I'm going to call it a realm or a state. I found myself in a place that was filled with incredibly beautiful white light, and that the most powerful, beautiful, unconditional love that I had ever felt. And I just felt totally embraced and permeated by this loving, intelligent force. And my soul instantly knew. It's like my soul recognized, is the best I can put words to it, because it's not like I heard the voice explaining or somebody telling me. It's my soul just knew. I knew or recognized somehow that what I was experiencing, what I was feeling, this incredible love that I was feeling, was the love of our higher power, or what I had been raised in my Christian upbringing to call God. And what I was actually experiencing God to be was nothing like what I'd been taught in Sunday school. It was not an old man with a long white beard sitting on a throne judging me if I'd been good or bad. That was not what I was actually experiencing. What I was actually experiencing was that the higher power, or what I call God, was like a universal force field that is infinitely intelligent and permeating all of past, present, future, omnipresent, and infinitely loving, unconditionally loving. And somehow, while I was, shall I say, basking in that love, as my body was still clawing to swim to shore down there, it really didn't matter to me whether my physical body managed to make it to shore, because I knew that what I think of as me would live on, whether or not in the drama down below the physical body managed to make it to shore. And I knew that to be true for me. And I also knew it to be true for everyone. That we all live on after our physical body dies. So I had absolutely, I mean, to be afraid of death would be a joke, because I was already on the other side. And it's in fact much more beautiful on the other side than the duality and struggles that we have when incarnated in a physical body. I felt like I was home. I felt like this is where I belong. I felt completely loved, completely accepted. And just an incredible explosion of love. My heart just burst wide open in that incredible love. Anyway, my body did manage to swim to shore through a whole series of coincidences. If you believe in coincidences, a series of coincidences led to there being a helicopter in the right place and getting a message and coming and finding us and bringing us to the closest hospital. And when I was brought to the hospital, I was um, profoundly hypothermic, meaning I was almost frozen to death. And I also had like lake water in my lungs. And the nurses put us, myself, the pilot, the nurse that survived the crash, into the hot whirlpool baths in the physiotherapy department in order to warm up our bodies again, hoping that that would revive us. And it was when I was sitting in the hot whirlpool bath when they were rewarming my body that all of a sudden I felt my consciousness re-enter my body. And what that felt like was like how they depict a genie being sucked into a bottle. Like I've been in this big expansive place up there, and then whoosh, suddenly I'm sucked through the top of my head into this little body here. It's like, oh, okay, I have to fit in this little body again. And then I was back, and I knew I'm back, I'm going to live. The outcome of this particular drama is that I'm going to live. So that was my first adult near-death experience, and that happened to me when I was 26. And it changed the course of the rest of my life because you said, what was most impactful? Well, that was definitely very, very impactful because it completely changed me. Completely changed me. I absolutely lost my fear of death. I mean, absolutely. I absolutely knew that I and everyone else, our souls will live on after our physical body dies. It's like shedding clothes, right? We leave these old clothes when they're worn out, their spirit goes on. I also came back, it was like I brought some of that love with me. I was sort of love intoxicated. I was just oozing love after I got back. I would look out my window and I'd see the squirrels playing on my lawn, and I would have waves of love for the squirrels. I would see the kids riding their bikes on the street, and I'd have waves of love for the kids listening to music. My heart would open and I'd start crying with love as I listened to music. It was like I was drunk with love afterwards. Thank goodness I had some time off work because of my severe frostbite to sort of integrate some of this. But one of the most beautiful healing miracles happened because I had that amount of love that blessed me when I came back, was that with that love and with that opening of my heart, I was able to reconcile with my father after the near death experience because we had been feuding, as young people and teenagers do. We weren't talking to each other. And the last thing I'd said to my dad was quite unkind, I'm sure. And after the near death experience, it was like I completely changed. My heart completely changed. I called up my dad. I said, Dad, I love you. Let's be friends. And my dad and I reconciled. We talked about, the issues that we'd had before. And you see, the interesting thing, Mike, is that my dad hadn't changed. He still had those quirks and personality traits that would drive me crazy before my near death experience. But after the near death experience, they didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered, the most important thing, was the love between us. And I am grateful to this day that that is one of the biggest blessings I received in my personal life from that near-death experience, is that I was able to reconcile with my dad. And we had a really beautiful, loving father-daughter relationship. He's told me every time after that, every time we talked, he always said, I love you, Yvonne. And what a healing that is to a soul to have that relationship with your father. He died, unfortunately, a number of years later, about 7 years later, but we had 7 beautiful years of a father-daughter relationship. But it changed me in another way, Mike, because as a medical doctor, I knew, wow, this was something extraordinary. And doctors, we're taught to diagnose things, put an accurate label on whatever is going on in people's lives. And so I was trying to diagnose, put a label on what had happened to me. So when I went back to work in the hospital where I was working in downtown Toronto, I asked my doctor friends, my colleagues, some of the very senior doctors in the hospital. Everyone wanted to hear what happened in the plane crash, so I told them. Um, and I said, has anyone heard of anything like this? Does anyone even have a name for this type of experience? And I mean, they all knew I wasn't crazy. I had a very good reputation as a doctor, but nobody had heard of anything like this. Like, this was back in the 70s. Nobody had heard of near-death experiences yet at that point. And so the best explanation any of my doctor friends and colleagues could come up with was that it was some sort of a hallucination.
There you go.
Yeah, that I was hallucinating. Somebody said because of a low blood sugar or an electrolyte imbalance. And I thought, no, this is not a hallucination. So it launched me on a quest to try and figure out what on earth was this that had happened to me? Is there a name for this type of experience? And the other thing is, it didn't stop changing me when I came back into my form. It seemed to have launched a new stage of my consciousness, windows in my consciousness opening. It's like this opened a window in my consciousness that did not shut completely. And so I started having other experiences of what we call spiritual or paranormal. I soon discovered that I was clairvoyant, that I was driving to visit a friend maybe a month or so after I had the near-death experience. I was stopped at an intersection in my car, and all of a sudden I get this clear visual image of my friend's brain covered in pus. And to me, as a medical doctor, it was really clear that was meningitis. And somehow I also knew it was the particular friend that I was going to visit, I was driving to visit. So when I got to her house, I said, I don't mean to sound weird, but how are you feeling? And so, and as it turned out, you can imagine, I said to her, listen, if you start feeling worse, she had a really bad headache. She was feeling sick. I said, you start feeling worse, go to the emergency department, tell them a doctor friend said you should be tested for meningitis. And don't tell them why, just say, a doctor friend says you should be tested for meningitis. So she did. And sure enough, she had meningitis. And this was the first of many clairvoyant experiences that I started having. Then, the voice that I heard, that's called clairaudience. That, oh my goodness, I discovered I was now clairaudient. I was getting guidance at other times, verbally, inwardly. But even the strongest of the clairs, that's what we now affectionately call them, the clairs, the strongest of the clairs that developed in me was clairsentience, is that I was like a walking truthometer. I I could tell if somebody was telling me the truth or lying because I could feel it inside of my being. I sensed it. I could sense their mental state, if they were angry, if they were sad, if they were in conflict, and I became incredibly sensitive to the emotions, thoughts, and feelings of people around me, which I now know is clairsentience. And so all of this stuff is happening to me. I'd also, a couple years before the plane crash, had a meditation experience with a rush of energy up through the top of my head, and I expanded into a mystical experience. I now know it was a Kundalini awakening. But back then, so I'm a young doctor, I had this experience in the plane crash, which I now know was a near-death experience. A few years before that, I had this powerful meditation experience, which I now know is a Kundalini awakening. Then I become clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. So, I very quickly learned I had to go in the closet. I couldn't let anybody, let alone my doctor friends, know about these experiences of consciousness because they were outside the box of what the medical model understood as, quotes, normal. And so I basically led a double life for many years. So on the outside, I was very successful in I got a teaching position at the University of Toronto, had a very successful medical career practicing Western medicine. But on the inside, in the closet, in my private hours, I was was what in my book I call a spiritual seeker. I had an awakening. I was reading everything I could get my hands on, trying to figure out what on earth is happening to me. I was started reading from the Christian tradition. Then I thought, okay, let's look in some other traditions. Let's look in Kabbalah. Let's look in yoga. Let's look in Buddhism. Then I started, okay, let's try some of these techniques. Let's try meditation. Let's try chanting. Let's try sweat lodges. So I began exploring spiritually and researching, trying to understand what had happened to me. So this experience, this plane crash near-death experience, launched me onto the stage I talk about in my book, Roadmap to the Next Awakening, to the Great Awakening. After the awakening, we become spiritual seekers. So I became a really avid spiritual seeker. But I was a spiritual seeker in the closet. That this was secret. I was doing it in my private life, and on the outside, I was a traditional Western trained medical doctor. But that all changed in 1990. Now, this was not a near-death experience. This was actually a mystical experience. I had been invited to speak at a conference in California that was being put on, a very pioneering conference that was being put on to discuss Kundalini awakening. This might have been like the first conference in the US to talk about Kundalini awakening. And I had been invited to speak because, as spirit would have it, I had the opportunity in the 70s to travel to India, and I met Gopi Krishna, who I learned about Kundalini from, never imagining that I could possibly have a Kundalini awakening, because how I misunderstood it in my unawakened state was that you had to be much more spiritually advanced than me to possibly have a Kundalini awakening. So I thought I was learning about stuff that would happen to other people, that I wasn't advanced enough. But with time, I realized, oh my goodness, that experience I had meditating back when I was 23, that was a Kundalini awakening. And I'm still having Kundalini symptoms that were accelerated by the near-death experience. I think near-death experiences actually can stimulate a Kundalini awakening or accelerate one if you're already in it. And so I think that's what it did with me. It accelerated, it opened me even wider. And I had the opportunity to read all of Gopi Krishna's books, etc. He became a mentor to me again. Like somehow it never dawned on me that it was happening to me. Eventually, I figured it out. So I was at this conference, invited to speak about what I had learned about Kundalini from Gopi Krishna, because not many people had had the opportunity to be mentored by Gopi Krishna, who wrote extensively about Kundalini. And while I was at that conference, a friend and I decided to facilitate a sharing circle, just in case there were any people at the conference who themselves were experiencing Kundalini and wanted to just share about it in a supportive environment. And much to our amazement and surprise, lots and lots of people showed up. So we divided into a group, me with my group, and I started the group by sharing a bit about my Kundalini awakening and my near-death experience, and that I'm a medical doctor, blah, blah, blah. And it was incredible, Mike, because what happened was people in my group started crying out of gratitude, like deep, heartfelt gratitude that this was the first time in maybe 20 years that they were in front of someone with an MD after their name who did not automatically judge them as crazy for the
Yeah.
experiences they were having. And people were just pouring, telling their stories, how they'd been mistreated, how they'd been, put in the psychiatric ward, labeled as crazy by doctors, by their family, by their churches, told it was work of the devil. I mean, just the horror stories and the relief and the gratitude. People were hugging me afterwards, crying. I was just moved. My heart was deeply moved, like cracked open another level by the gratitude people were expressing towards me. And I went for a walk, in that sort of very open state with my heart, contemplating what had just happened with all of this gratitude. And I was walking on the Sand Dunes Park. It was Asilomar, California, on the ocean at night. And all of a sudden, what happened was it was like where my head is transformed into a sun. This incredible sun radiating light in all directions, like it literally was illuminating the world around me. It was like I was shining, radiating light. And in this state of my consciousness transformed into a beacon of light, I could taste the, like they call it amrita in yoga, dripping in the back of my throat, which happens sometimes in mystical experiences. While I was in this luminous mystical state, I had, the best word I can say is a revelation. I didn't hear a word. Nobody explained it to me. I just knew. I just knew that I was being called, and that I was being called to share what I had learned publicly. None of this in the closet stuff anymore. And I was being called to be an advocate for mystics, for experiencers, because doctors, the public, families, everybody was doing harm by labeling spiritual experiencers as crazy. So this incredible luminous state, I have no idea how long it lasted, but when it ended, I was like trembling inside because the calling was so powerful. And this launched me. I now call this my calling mystical experience, but this launched me into the next step of my spiritual awakening journey. Enough of the searching and all this sort of stuff in the closet. Now it was about being of service. I was being called to action, and I was also being called to be a spiritual warrior, because there was a lot of resistance to, being the first medical doctor in Canada to say this isn't crazy, and to specialize my practice in this and to justify it to all the medical licensing boards and all that sort of stuff. But the calling was so strong. It was like there was no question that it was like this was my life purpose. This was my calling. And I now understood why I had to have had these experiences within my own consciousness. So it enabled me to become the spiritual warrior, saying, this is not crazy. I know it's not crazy because I'm experiencing it myself. So that was, I think, the second really, really pivotal STE in my life, launching me on the next spiritual life stage, which is focused on service. Yeah. Now, if you want me to go on, I'll go through some of
Well,
my next ones. You might have a few questions you want to ask me.
yeah, we're gonna definitely move on to the those next ones, but I want to stop for a moment because you brought up so many really important points, and that is um, these experiences come to us oftentimes to awaken us into embracing that which we already are, to recognize that every single one of us comes into this life with a purpose. And so many people, when I speak, and I've spoken to people all over the world, one of the biggest questions people have is there a purpose for me being here? Right? Is this just an accident of cells coming together and a being is created, or did I come into this life with a purpose? And your experience and the experience of millions of people who've had near-death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences, the kind of the link to all of those experiences is the recognition that there is a purpose to this lifetime, that we came here to learn about who we really are, that this is not who we really are, and you experienced that directly, that you were soul, you were a
Hmm.
spiritual divine being who was inhabiting a physical body to interact with the physical world, right?
Hmm.
But you knew
Exactly.
your real self was not that. Your real
Hmm.
self is soul or
Hmm.
spirit. Number two, so who am I? Why am I here? Right? That's another big question that people have. And you already, just this, what you've shared with us, helps us understand that we came here to awaken. We came here to learn more about our divine nature and our connection with each other, because you brought up service. So, a lot of people, and I myself in my past, a lot of us started out searching,
Hmm.
investigating, praying and meditating and reading and studying to have a personal experience, a personal understanding. But then all of a sudden, the byproduct, which becomes the more important product, is we understand that we are all connected, all life. And as we awaken, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to
Hmm.
help each other awaken, help each other learn, help each other deal with the changes that come when you start to awaken. And, some of us have to have a very dramatic experience to overcome the challenges for you being a medical doctor. I think, Spirit knew you had to have a really traumatic experience to give you the tools you needed to be able to overcome all that traditional, thinking in medicine at the time was saying, oh, you know, it's your imagination, or it's an effect of brain damage, or it's an effect of hallucination, or whatever. Um, but we're beginning to understand that we don't need necessarily to have a near-death experience to have a life expansion or a consciousness expansion that is transformative. And you
Hmm.
you you coined it the spiritual transformative experience. And did you come up with that concept? And
Yes, I'm the person who first coined that phrase back in the 90s. And
wow,
because I felt at the time, because I told you that it was in 1990 that I had the calling, and I came out of the closet and I specialized my medical practice. And I advertised, to all the doctors, which is what you do when you open a new specialty clinic of some sort. You advertise, I'm having this sort of specialty clinic. If you want to refer patients to me, send them over. And I was flooded. I had like all kinds of people coming to see me. And then I was on media and radio and television. So my practice was flooded from that point forward. And as I was counseling people and hearing more people's stories, it became clear to me that we needed a term. We needed a vocabulary. We needed a word that was positive, that would be like an umbrella term, a big, big, big umbrella term, because, like you said, not everybody has near death experiences. In fact, in my practice, when I took statistics, it was only a small proportion, about 10% of people going through spiritual awakenings were having a near death experience. Other people, it was other ways. Maybe they were having a mystical experience brought on by
yes,
prayer or by meditation. Maybe they were having a Kundalini awakening. Maybe they're having after death communications with the departed loved one. I mean, there are lots of ways that people can have spiritual awakenings, but there was no umbrella term. I understood within my own being, and also from my understanding of the yogic model of consciousness, that all of these experiences that are labeled paranormal or spiritual, they're all connected to our consciousness capacity being capable of expanding to much greater than what, the current little box is, what we think is, the physical reality of our consciousness. No, we are capable of having much broader range of consciousness experiences. And I was experiencing it within my own consciousness. Yoga understands this. Buddhism understands this. Just we in the West didn't. The Western medical model didn't. So I thought I needed a word. I was searching for a word, and after trying out a few terms, I came up with this term, spiritually transformative experience, as a big umbrella term. And you know what? It keeps on expanding because people keep telling me about even more different kinds of ways that they're having awakenings. And I mean, the divine plan is immense, but that is why I coined the term, so that there would be an umbrella term that is positive for the diverse kinds of spiritual awakening experiences. And I'm delighted that now it's like 30 years later that the term has really caught on, that people are using spiritually transformative experiences, sometimes not realizing that, I was the only one waving that flag for over 10 years. But yeah, and I also want to pick up on another point that you said, Mike, which is, and I talk about it in my book, Roadmap to the Great Awakening, where I have a section where I talk about types of spiritual awakenings. Because some people will have a spiritually transformative experience, like a very definite experience of expanded consciousness, let's say like a near-death experience or a mystical experience or whatever, Kundalini, very distinct, that is like their opening or awakening experience. And they can be very life transforming. Like in the Bible, for those of you who are raised Christian, Paul on the road to Damascus, he had a mystical experience that totally changed his life. And for many people who have a powerful spiritually transformative experience, like me, totally changes your life. But other people don't awaken that way. Some people have what I describe in my book as gradual spiritual awakenings, and they don't have any big explosive experience. That maybe they might begin by, maybe on the internet they heard a few stories, a few podcasts. They might find it interesting. They might, let's listen to some more near-death experience stories. Let's listen to some more remote viewing stories. Let's listen to some more mediumship stories. And so they develop a curiosity, or maybe they hear about meditation and they go, let's check this out. Let's try meditation. I mean, nowadays, just about everybody's heard of meditation. So it's very easy, take a course here in meditation, or maybe you decide to try yoga, you decide to try Tai Chi or something, and then they're teaching you meditation. So, or chanting or contemplation or any of these practices. And that people find that gradually, with these practices, they're gradually having a spiritual awakening. And so I want everyone to know you're included. Okay. This also counts. You don't need to have a big explosive STE to be spiritually awakening. And then there's a third category that I talk about in my book, which is new. This is the first time I've talked about this, but it's really struck me how this is happening to people. I call it spiritually transformative life events.
Ah,
So this is a life event that has a very positive spiritual impact on you. I mean, I was watching, it doesn't matter what people's political views are, but I was watching, for example, the memorial service for Charlie Kirk when I was watching it on TV. And it was so spiritually impactful. I mean, people were having born again experiences. People were having like a spiritual renewal. And I mean, I was even finding it that I was so spiritually moved by some of this, particularly songs. I'm very moved by songs, by some of the songs that were being sung, that I was like on my feet, knees, praying, God, help me, open my heart further. That it's a spiritual, I call it a spiritual renewal event. And so, but this was some, I didn't have an STE, it was something happening out in the world that caused my heart to open. So a spiritual event, other events that are less political, for example, having a newborn baby, that sometimes that's an incredibly heart opening event for the mother, for the father, sometimes for other relatives, sometimes holding somebody else's newborn baby. That something happens as we look at the baby, and it's innocence, the God shining through its eyes still, that it triggers something. Another type of spiritually transforming life event would be close calls. That people tell me, oh, I was driving along the highway and all of a sudden the transport truck came across the meridian. I thought I was going to die. And then the last minute, he got back over. And so I go, wow, so did you go out of body? Did you have a, no, 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 they just kept driving their car. But after they got home, they started thinking about it. And then they thought, oh my God, I think I experienced a miracle. I think God intervened and my guardian angels looked after me today. Thank you. And maybe this causes a spiritual awakening. So there are many life events that they're not an STE, but they can cause a spiritual awakening. So there are many, many types of spiritual awakenings. But the thing that's the same, and I talk about it in the book, is after you're awakened, after you have the awakening, no matter how it happens, whether it's gradual, an STE, or a spiritually transforming life event, then people start exploring, like, let me read a little more about spirituality. Let me listen to some podcasts. Let me try some other techniques. And then the heart keeps opening more and more and more as they explore. Mm-hmm.
This is amazing. I'd like to pause for a second because I want to have the viewers who are here and also who are going to be viewing this later on today, this week, this month. I want for them to have the opportunity to first find out more about your book. So let's take them there. Go to your website and let them get to see what that's about. Then I want to talk about your conference because you have a big worldwide conference coming up in June that we want to talk a little bit about. But let's first let me get them over to your website, and I want them to see about your book. Let's go to there. Okay. This, by the way, it's a beautiful website.
Thank you.
And folks, if you're looking at this, whether it's today, tonight, tomorrow, or whenever, Yvonne Kason, right? Yvonne, Dr. YvonneKason.com. Write that down, Dr. YvonneKason.com. And you'll be able to see information about a number of her books, but the book that she is going to be having her super brand new release kicking off at the conference, the Spiritual Awakenings International Conference coming up in June, Roadmap to the Great Awakening. And again, Roadmap to the Great Awakening, you can get that wherever you buy books, or you can go to her website, Dr. Yvonne Kason, and be able to get information on how to get that. I want to also stop for a moment and I want to tell them about the conference. So let's share for a second. Go back here, pressing all kinds of buttons. Yes. Okay. So this is really important. Uh, you know, to discover these things for yourself through your own personal experience, through study, through meditation, contemplation. Um, And having your own personal experiences is extremely important. What's also incredibly empowering is to be able to interact with people who are also having the same experiences. We're having, profound consciousness opening experiences, and also those gradual everyday experiences that Yvonne talked about. There's going to be a conference coming up June 6th to 7th, and Dr. Kason is going to be a keynote speaker there, and there are going to be a number of really incredible speakers, 42 speakers from 12 countries around the world. This is going to happen on June 6th to 7th, 2026, this year, June 6th to 7th. It's going to be on Zoom, and it's going to be free to attend. But if you are so moved, you can definitely happily make a donation, but it's free. If you want to register, if you go to spiritualconference.org, real simple name, spiritualconference.org, you'll be able to get lots of information, be able to click on one button and register for it. Be ready to get all the links and things that you need to attend it. I'm looking forward to attending it and meeting some of the folks. And I hope that you will find it, interesting. You're definitely going to find it interesting and empowering. So let's come back to our discussion here. You talked about these life-changing experiences. I wanted to share quickly a couple with you. I did not have a near-death experience, but I had what I call a near-life experience. And it was revealed to me after having a very dramatic spiritual transformative experience. So my parents, a year before I was born, were getting ready to deliver into the world a child. It was a male child. And I had the experience of preparing to enter the body at the birth of that child, but a spiritual being was with me and explained to me, you have two choices. If you enter that body on this date, when the baby is going to be born, you are going to be able to burn off a tremendous amount of karmic baggage in a very short time, because the child is going to be born severely disabled. The cord would be wrapped around its neck. It was compressed. It had brain damage, spinal damage. So you have that opportunity to choose that. However, if you wait a year, there will be another baby, another body for you to choose. If you wait, you will have a much longer lifetime of experiences and of effort, but you will make much quicker spiritual progress and be able to serve others in their spiritual pursuits. You have the choice. And I remember recognizing the importance of the second choice, that it was important not to be selfish and say, man, I could get rid of everything in one shot. Or, I would go through what everyone has to go through, but the rewards would be so much deeper. And more importantly, I would be able to have an impact on other people's lives. Now, this was revealed to me when I was 3 years old. I had a spiritually transformative experience where I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew I was 3 years old or earlier because my younger sister had not been born yet. She's 4 years younger. But in the middle of the night, I awoke and looked at the wall in front of my bed, and a giant arch of light opened up in the wall. And I could see beings floating around in the background, but one being came out. And I had this recognition. I knew this being. Well, it turned out later on, it was the being with me when I had to make that choice. And he came into the room surrounded by light, and he started downloading. he started downloading an incredible amount of information. I was like feeding off a fire hose. It was all of this information about me, my past, my present, my future. And my heart opened up just like you talked about, this incredible opening of my heart. And, a 3-year-old's heart is small, but this was like my heart was like acres wide. And I'm downloading, and my heart is opening up, and I'm filled with this incredible love for this being and for life and for God and for, everybody like you did. And then the downloading stopped, the being started to recede back into the wall. And I jumped up and I ran and tried to jump into the arch of light that he was receding to. And I smashed right into the wall. And I started to cry. Where are you going? I want to be with you. I want to go with you. I don't want this to end. And he looked at me with kind of a little bit of humor, but a great deal of compassion. He said, "You cannot come with me yet. You must earn your wings first. But then after that, many, many incredible things are in store for you." And then he receded into the wall, and I'm bloody, and I'm, wiping the blood off and crying, and then made my way back to bed. But that changed, at 3 years old, that set me on a path because I had the understanding that number one, there were beings watching me, that my life did have a purpose because I did choose the second body. Right? I chose the body a year later, and he actually showed me in my dreams what the lifetime would have been if I had chosen the first body of the severely disabled being, and it was horrific. It was horrendous. The pain, the agony, the brain damage, the absolute terrible suffering, both for me as a child and for my parents. And then he showed me what my life would be like if I chose the second one. And my life is exactly the way they showed me, choosing that second body. Another experience I had, I want to share quickly, is I had a dream once where I was in this building, and it was kind of like your traditional haunted house. It was dark and it was kind of scary. And I walked into there, and all of a sudden, I started to see these little globes of light starting to enter the room and surrounding me. And then out of these globes of light were these forms of little ghost-like figures. And even though part of me was afraid, my heart was opening up. And I know when I have that feeling of my heart opening up and feeling love, I know this is important and it's not scary. So I looked at them, and they took on the imagery of children, little children. And I asked them, "Who are you and why am I here with you?" And they said, "We are the souls of young children who have passed away at young ages. And we are asking you to help our parents heal their pain. We know that death is not the end, that we as our souls, we are eternal. And that we come into a life, you know this for certain, we come into a life the way we come in, the way we stay, and the way we leave, all have tremendous spiritual impact on everyone involved. We would like you to help us help our parents." And what's really interesting is not soon after that experience, my sister started dating a gentleman who lost his 5-year-old son. And it was a very quick, strange intestinal blockage type of situation. And he was not able to save his son. He was a firefighter, medic, paramedic, and he could not save. And he was so filled with guilt and anger. And when the first time I met with him, we talked about he had never been able to have a dream with his son. And so I began to share with him some of the spiritual exercises and some of the chanting before going to sleep, some of the dream work that I had done. And I recommended that he do this and ask to have a dream with his son, because we are connected through our dreams as well as through meditation and prayer and contemplation. We're connected to each other. All life is connected. So found out that later on he did this and he had this incredible transformative dream where he was on a beach and his son came running up to him and he jumped in his arms and he was holding him and he was crying. He was saying, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. I missed you so much. I'm so sorry I couldn't save your life." And his son pushed back a little bit, looked in his eyes with tremendous love. He said, "That's okay, Daddy. Look, I'm fine. I'm wonderful." He said, "We made a contract long ago that in this life, my life would end so that I could save yours. Because a long time ago, you saved mine in another time, in another place." And this opened up a tremendous healing for him, but also it transformed him, and he immediately knew his purpose. And he later started an organization to help parents who had lost their children heal. And then worked for another organization. And he invited me to come in, and I did many, many, many workshops for parents who lost children, helping them learn to use their meditations, their dreams, journaling, being able to write a letter to their child and then get a letter back from them. And it was many, many months later, I was looking at that, what it had done. I'd actually even created an audio cassette training program to work with your dreams. And suddenly I looked back and I said, "Oh my goodness, all of this was part of the result of that dream with the children." And I had totally forgotten that dream, right? But this was a result of them coming to me being open to the fact that this wasn't my imagination, this wasn't evil, this wasn't scary. This was life, the divine, helping me understand you have a purpose, and I will connect you with the things you need to do to carry on part of your mission in this life. A mission you agreed to by coming in a year later and living a longer life. So I wanted to thank you for everything that you're sharing because it's helped me put into perspective the things I went through. And I know that many of our listeners and viewers have had very similar experiences. And so thank you for that. Let's go back to your book and back to some of these stages, because you talked about we go through these gradual stages of spiritual opening and upliftment. Could you talk a little more about these stages? In your book, you talk about these heart stages.
Yeah. So the model that I share in my book is called Purifying the Heart.
Ah,
And it has 5 stages. And this is not a model that I invented. I actually, when I was counseling people, and also because of my own spiritual awakening journey, and I noticed how different experiences over the years, over my lifetime, were changing me in different ways. I realized I was going through definite stages. And so I thought, isn't there like a roadmap or a guide that somebody who has successfully made it to the end has left us so that we can know, where are we on the path and what are some of the pitfalls so we won't get stuck? And so I looked for various models for many years, and when I found this model, Swami Sri Yukteswar, the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda, wrote it in his book, The Holy Science, Purifying the Heart. I immediately recognized it. It resonated with me as truth. And so I've elaborated on it, expanded on it in my book, Roadmap to the Great Awakening. And so basically, what the Purifying the Heart model says is the roadmap where many people, when they are born into our world today, at this time in history, are at the very lowest level of the spiritual awakening, purifying the heart model, which is called the dark heart stage. And so the dark heart stage, that's basically before the spiritual awakening. So people at the dark heart stage, I mean, we have to look around us and it's pretty obvious what that is, but dark heart stage is characterized by um, materialistic thinking, by selfishness, by greed. It is also marked by misunderstanding of scriptures and perversion of scriptures into things that are cruel and barbaric. Um, and some people even think it's a spirit. It's not spiritual to be cruel. It's not spiritual to be barbaric. That is misinterpretation of scriptures. That has nothing to do with spirituality. So I want to make a clear distinction between what some people are calling quotes religions, which may be just cult mentality that is misinterpretation of scriptures, versus true spirituality, what happens after a spiritual awakening, where our heart starts opening to love. Our heart starts opening to truth. Our heart starts opening to the fact that we're, as you said, souls living in a physical body, that this is a temporary housing, like clothes. And so after the spiritual awakening, we become we're on what's called the propelled heart stage, which is the stage of the spiritual seeker. So a lot of people listening to this show are probably on the propelled heart stage. They're looking, they're searching, they're trying out different things, they're reading, they're listening to podcasts. And this is a really important stage. And um, some people will stay on this stage for the rest of their incarnation. According to Swami Sri Yukteswar, this might be multiple incarnations that people are exploring. And I think it's important not to have judgment because everyone's different. Every soul is different. Every personality is different. Our karma from many past lives is different. So everyone has their own unique journey, and you need to explore as long as you need to explore. But what happens as people are exploring, and we talked a little bit about it earlier on in the show, Mike, is that their heart keeps opening progressively, their heart's opening. They embrace their inner healing, their inner child recovery work. They get their life in order. They start healing their own wounds. They start learning about things like forgiveness, taking responsibility. That there's an opening, a gradual opening of the heart that's happening. And as this is happening, people are getting more humble. They're getting more respectful of others, realizing, maybe I'm not right all the time. Maybe I'm not the victim all the time. Maybe I have something to learn from others by opening my heart and being humble. And so humility increases. But the other thing that happens after a period of time in the propelled heart stage, the spiritual seeker, they reach a point where they get sort of tired of the search and they want clarity. So their heart turns to God, spirit, however they understand the higher power. Please guide me. What is my path? What is my path that's gonna take me the distance? It's gonna take me home. Please give me clarity. What is my path? And I remember when I reached that point, and I prayed, please guide me. If I do have a guru, please show me really clearly who it is. Show me my path really clearly. And after I started praying that, it did become very, very clear to me that I did start having inner visions of a yogic guru. And later on, when I went travel to Israel, I had a profound inner experience with Jesus. So I know my path I'm a Christian yogi, that I believe Christ was a yogi and I'm a yogi and I'm a Christian. So there we go. That is my path, the Paramahansa Yogananda lineage. Everybody has to find their own path. I'm clear on what my path is. So when people reach, then graduate or shift, and it can be sudden, into the next stage, which is called the steady heart stage. And this is where you have the loving server and the spiritual warrior. Because with this clarity of your path, the person now embraces the practices really deeply. They're not searching and trying out a million different paths anymore. No. Then they start going very, very deep into their own practices of their particular path. Paramahansa Yogananda expressed this very beautifully. He said that on the early part of your awakening, when you're a spiritual seeker, you should sample from a lot of spiritual wells. Taste the water from a lot of spiritual wells and see, does it resonate with you? Does it nourish you spiritually? Does it feel right for you? But he said, once you find the well that resonates with your soul as your path calling you home, stop sampling from a bunch of different wells, but drink deeply of that well. Go the distance with that path. So that is what happens when people reach the steady heart stage. And with this opening of the heart and with this commitment to the steady heart stage, at the same time, service becomes a priority. It's at this stage of the opening of the heart, people want to be of service to others. And maybe they didn't do volunteer work before. All of a sudden, they have the urge to do various types of volunteer work. Maybe they're cutting down how many hours they're working at their job because they want to do more volunteer work. Or they might change the nature of what they're doing for their vocation because they want to be helping others. Like with me, it was I specialized in helping people who are having spiritual awakening experiences. And this is also the stage of the spiritual warrior. And I want to talk a little bit about the spiritual warrior because there's two meanings of being a spiritual warrior. The outer meaning is when people in their desire to serve are even willing to put themselves in harm's way in order to be of service to others. So me, for example, I risked losing my medical license. That would be called being a spiritual warrior. That being willing to risk negative consequences. And people can be a physical spiritual warrior by being a soldier or a police officer or a protector, a bodyguard, protecting their family, their country. But people can also be verbal spiritual warriors, fighting for principles, standing up for principles, being a negotiator, trying to bring peace in very precarious and difficult situations. There are many ways to be a spiritual warrior. That's the outer manifestation of the spiritual warrior. But there's also an inner level of the spiritual warrior, and everybody at the steady heart stage is an inner spiritual warrior. And what the inner spiritual warrior is that everyone at this stage of opening their consciousness, opening their heart, is battling the shadow issues within themselves, their karma from the past, their bad habits, their assumptions and misconceptions from the past that they have to let go of, because as their heart is opening, they're realizing, oh, that really doesn't resonate as truth. And oh, that doesn't really fit me anymore. And this can be painful sometimes because, these might be concepts or lifestyles that you really embraced strongly for many years. Maybe your whole family embraces it, and it can cause hardships if people around you don't understand your changing values and changing priorities. I mean, your family, your friends, your spouse, your coworkers, they may not understand why, for example, you don't want to do drugs anymore. You don't want to overindulge in alcohol anymore. That maybe you even want to change your political party. I mean, you're going to a different church. I mean, all of these things can be challenging, but they're part of getting your life in alignment with the spiritual truths that are blossoming with you and the love true love, which is on all levels. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So you have to love your neighbor and you have to love yourself. So you have to look after yourself, set appropriate boundaries, look after your body, look after your mind, look after your spirit. So this is the inner spiritual warrior. So this is a very, very beautiful stage. And I think there could be many people listening to the show who are at this stage now in their journey, that they found their path. They've done this exploring, but now they found their path and they're embracing it very deeply. And love and service is what their life is all about. Love, dedication to their path, and service to others. But there are two more stages after that in the Purifying the Heart roadmap. And the next stage is called the devoted heart stage. And people on that stage are what I call devotees. And after a period of time on the steady heart stage and doing your practices really deeply and really regularly, and becoming more humble as you're being of service to others, like sincerely humble, people will have more spiritual experiences. They will have more and repeated and sometimes very power inner experiences. And as these inner deep spiritual experiences have happened more and more over the years, this shift into the next stage happens when people realize through their own inner experience, not through book learning, but through their own inner experience, that true happiness comes from the inside. It comes from accessing those deep, calm, spiritual states of consciousness. It's not from the ups and downs that happen in the world. And that really the path to the portal to having that inner happiness is learning to rise above emotionality, to detach and let go of our ego desires, to surrender to the divine wisdom of the divine plan. And then it's like the focus has now gone inward, and it's make me your instrument, thy will be done. There's an inner focus of the devotee. They're striving to go deeper into that beautiful spiritual stillness and oneness within. And they know that in order to do that, they have to rise above the ego, detach and let go. And it's about surrender. It's about surrendering. Make me your purified instrument. You call it co-creating, but it involves surrender, surrender. And that is the stage of the devotee. And so the devotee may still serve in the world, absolutely. And the devotee is still embracing their spiritual practices very deeply. And they're still a spiritual warrior because you're still battling, shadow issues will keep coming up no matter what stage you're at. But now it's that the focus is inwards. It's about surrender and detachment from the ego, that we know true happiness is in the deep mystical communion within. And people, when they reach this stage, often want to spend much more time in their spiritual practices than they did before. They usually will often develop a very strong urge to be alone, to go on meditation retreats, to go on long meditation retreats, to be alone in nature, that they crave this alone time, to be alone with spirit and to focus on their spiritual deepening. But at this stage too, as we're burning off more and more of our own shadow issues as the inner spiritual warrior, and through our meditation and contemplation practices, burning things off, that at this stage, many people will have what's called the dark night of the soul. So I want to mention this too, because this can be a very challenging period, the dark night of the soul. And mystics in many traditions have talked about it, but I think it comes from the Christian tradition. St. John of the Cross, I think, talked about going through very intense dark night of the soul. And what dark night of the soul is and it can happen at earlier stages. Some people have told me they have gone through a dark night of the soul at earlier stages in their spiritual awakening journey. And for some people, it was even what launched them into their first spiritual awakening was coming through a dark night of the soul. And when they emerged, okay, that's it. I'm giving up alcohol. I'm giving up drugs. I'm embracing 12 steps. So dark night of the soul can launch a spiritual awakening too. So, but many people will have it. Some people say it's like a final test, as you're going deeper and up this the mountain of spiritual awakening towards the summit. This like, okay, will you still cling to your faith, to your spiritual practices when you're not getting any rewards? You're not having any of the bliss. You're not having any of the inner peace. You're not having any STEs. You're not having any, you are instead are feeling depression or blackness or nothing or incredible struggles. That this is the dark night of the soul. And for me personally, my dark night of the soul period came after my most recent near-death experience. And in my book, I talk about it as heaven and hell experience. First, I had heaven, where I died after my head injury in 2003, was on the other side, was incredibly beautiful experience in the white light realm. We don't have time today to go into that. That can be another show. But afterwards, when I came back into my body, I was disabled with a serious traumatic brain injury. I'd had a brain hemorrhage, traumatic brain injury that disabled me. I went to neuro rehab for 7 years and I was not able to return to the practice of medicine. I had written 4 books before that, and it was like, okay, I guess that for whatever reason in the divine plan, my outer worldly life was over. That's what I figured must be. And that now I would be a disabled person because I wasn't getting better. I had, what they were terming permanent traumatic brain injury after effects. And I was disabled. And so I accepted that in terms of my own spiritual path, that for whatever reason in the divine plan, I was now to be a disabled person, and that how I would serve, because my soul still wants to serve, is through my prayer and meditation. So that would be how I would serve rather than out in the world. So I dedicated myself very much to regaining the ability to meditate, because that's something I lost. Took me about 8 years to even be able to meditate for an hour, and it was more like about 10 years before I could do long 3-hour meditations again. And I started doing really focusing on my meditation, started going into deeper and deeper states of consciousness again. And then I experienced a miracle. So my dark night of the soul ended with a miracle. That it was on February 24th, 2016. I just passed my 10-year anniversary. While I was deeply meditating in a holy spot, place in Encinitas, California, where Paramahansa Yogananda used to go into samadhi, into God communion, I was meditating there. I love meditating in power spots. And all of a sudden I inwardly perceived like an eruption of liquid light in the center of my brain. And I had this sensation of waking up. It was like the center of my brain had been asleep for 12 years since my traumatic brain injury, and it woke up, and I experienced a miraculous, sudden, spontaneous brain healing. And I was given the strong inner message, pass on what you have learned. And it was like floodgates open, and my consciousness that had been all the knowledge that had been locked in like a broken computer, all of a sudden it's plugged in and working again. And I've been writing. And this book is the third book I've written since my spontaneous brain healing. The first one I wrote that you showed the pictures earlier on was Touched by the Light, and that defines all the different types of spiritually transformative experiences. It gives a vocabulary for people. That came out in 2019. This came out in 2022, Soul Lessons from the Light. That's my personal spiritual awakening journey where I describe all 5 of my near-death experiences. And this is 2026, just came out. So this book is a product of a miracle. Those other 2 books are all a product of a miracle. And so the message I'm going to leave people, I think we're at the end of time, is never give up hope. Miracles do happen. With God, all things are possible. I was offline for 12 years for refurbishment, it seems, but when it was the divine plan, plugged in again. And here I am passing on what I learned through my books and also through Spiritual Awakenings International, which I was guided by Spirit to found in 2020. And I'm hoping everyone will come to our conference on June 6th and 7th online and hear all sorts of fabulous stories in addition to mine.
Okay. Again, we've shown you the website, Yvonne's website, dyvonneKason.com. And also here you have information that you can go to and go to spiritualconference.org,
Mm-hmm.
spiritualconference.org, easy to remember. And you'll be able to sign up for that free conference, listen to other amazing speakers. And again, Yvonne is going to be one of their keynote speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope this has been as helpful for you folks as it's been for me. Um, Yvonne, I just wanted to read you a couple of comments from a bunch of our Facebook audience. The first one is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. May the blessings be.
Mm.
And another comment was amazing interview.
Mm.
Love this so much. Thank you. This was an epic masterpiece experience that you
Mm.
shared. So there's many more, but our time is closing, and you've given us so generously so much of your time today, and also in our past phone call. But I'm looking forward to seeing you at the conference, see you speak, and continue to read your book and get your other books. And we have an individual, old friend Randy, who joined us, one of the folks who joined us on Zoom. And Randy, Barbara, and Lou, because you were brave enough and loving enough to attend in person, I'm going to purchase Yvonne's new book and send it to you uh, as my gift to you for thanking you for responding to the show. And please share. You know that this show will stay on my Facebook page, and also it will go on my YouTube page by Tuesday. Again, my YouTube page is MikeDeLucaPodcast.com. Real easy to remember, MikeDeLucaPodcast.com, and you'll be able to watch this interview. Please tell all your friends, family, people you love, people you hate, all kinds of people. Just send them there to watch this interview. It is going to be life-changing for them. It certainly was life-changing for me. Yvonne, thank you so much, not only for your time tonight and for all the books you've written. Thank you for all the service you have provided to so many. You truly are a very, very, very special soul. You're part of our family here at Integrative Wellness and Development Podcast. We love you. We're grateful for you and look forward to having you back because there's still a whole lot more we need to talk about that was covered in your book. So we'll definitely have you back.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And I'm grateful to you too for what you're doing with your podcast. And thank you for having me on.
Very, very welcome. And so, folks, thank you for joining us. You know I love you. You know I care about you. You know I appreciate you. Please keep going deeper and deeper inside yourself. Please be true to your calling, your mission in this life. Please know that you are loved, and please keep shining your light because the world needs it. And with that, I'll wish you a good night, a good week, a good month, a good life, and we will see you in our next episode of Integrative Wellness and Development Podcast. And I hope to see you at that conference as well, spiritualconference.org. Okay, take care, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.